My name is Cora Vance. I'm a landscape architect, which is a profession that sounds more poetic than it is. Most of my days are spent not with flowers, but with blueprints, drainage calculations, and soil composition charts. I build serenity for other people. I design gardens that are meant to be sanctuaries, places of quiet contemplation where the chaos of the world can be held at bay by a well-placed stone wall or the gentle rustle of ornamental grasses. For years, I believed that if I could just design the right kind of life for my family, calm, supported, beautiful, they might finally see me as a part of it and not just the person who drew the plans. It was a Tuesday in early December, the sky over Harborview, Washington, a familiar shade of bruised lavender, when my phone chimed. The rain was drawing silver threads down my apartment window. I had a cup of chamomile tea steaming on my desk, a half-finished planting schedule for a new corporate campus glowing on my monitor. The message was from my brother, Liam. It wasn't a call, it was never a call. It was a single, devastatingly casual text that landed with the force of a physical blow. Hey Cora, quick heads up. For the solstice dinner this year, we're going to keep it really small. Just the four of us. Sophie's feeling a bit overwhelmed with everything, and we thought it would be best. Hope you understand. I read it once, then twice. Just the four of us. My brother Liam, his girlfriend Sophie, my mother Eleanor, and my father Robert. A perfect, neat square. I was the stray line, the awkward angle that didn't fit. Sophie's feeling a bit overwhelmed. Sophie, who had been in our lives for all of 8 months. Sophie, for whose comfort I was being politely, surgically excised from the one family tradition that mattered to me. This, after I had poured $85,000 of my own inheritance into their dream. 18 months earlier, when my father took an early, reluctant retirement and my mother grew wistful for a purpose, they'd concocted a plan to buy a struggling bookshop in the Old Town district. They called it Willow Creek Books and Cafe. It was a lovely, romantic, and financially perilous idea. They had passion but no capital. I had just received a modest inheritance from my grandmother, money she had specifically told me to use to buy a small apartment in the city, a foothold of my own. Instead, I gave it to them. Not as a loan, because my father's pride wouldn't allow it. Not in exchange for a partnership, because they wanted it to be theirs. It was a gift, given with the quiet, desperate hope that this monumental act of love would finally secure my place in the heart of the family. This will be the anchor for all of us, Cora, my mother had said, her eyes shining. I'd believed her. I stared at the text message, the 3 little words at the end echoing in the sudden, vast silence of my apartment. Hope you understand. I did understand. In that one crystalline moment, I understood everything. I understood that my love was not a pillar of the family, but its scaffolding essential for construction, but meant to be taken down once the real structure was in place. I understood that my worth to them was liquid, transactional. My presence was conditional, subject to the whims of a near stranger. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could feel the familiar surge of adrenaline, the frantic need to explain, to defend, to plead my case. The old Cora would have called, her voice tight with unshed tears, asking, what did I do wrong? She would have offered to come later, to bring dessert, to make herself smaller and smaller until she was no trouble at all. But the rain on the window, the quiet hum of my computer, the scent of my tea, it all felt like mine. This small pocket of peace was the only thing that truly belonged to me. And in that moment, protecting it felt more important than fighting for a seat at a table where my invitation had always been written in pencil. I typed back 2 words. Okay, understood. And with that simple act of acquiescence, I began to disappear. Not in a storm of rage, but like the morning mist burning off the harbor. I didn't block them. I didn't yell. I simply stopped. I opened my laptop and navigated to a folder named Willow Creek. It wasn't filled with angry receipts, but with love letters I hadn't known I was writing. There was the pro bono garden design I'd created for their back patio, a soft-lit haven of climbing jasmine and bluestone pavers, designed to be their refuge. There were the spreadsheets tracking vendors, the contact lists for bakers and coffee suppliers I had curated for them. And there were the automatic payment schedules I'd set up from my own account to cover their initial overheads, the big ones they couldn't manage. The monthly rent for the historic building. The quarterly premium for their business insurance. The standing order with the regional book distributor. My support wasn't just a one-time check. It was a root system I had carefully planted, silently feeding their dream from beneath the surface. With a deep, steadying breath, I went through them, one by one. I didn't delete the files. That felt too much like anger. Instead, I canceled the payments. I logged into my bank and stopped the automatic transfer for the first of the month, the one that covered their rent. I canceled the insurance payment due next week. I sent a polite, brief email to the book distributor, informing them that I would no longer be guaranteeing the Willow Creek account. Each click was not an act of revenge. It was an act of retrieval. I was reclaiming the pieces of myself I had given away so freely. The text message hadn't just been an uninvitation, it had been a release from a contract I never realized I was bound by. They didn't want me. But they were more than happy to have my money, my time, my expertise, my quiet, unending support. They had mistaken my love for a line of credit. The silence that followed was profound. For the rest of the day, my phone remained quiet. They had what they wanted, my absence. They just didn't understand yet that my absence came with consequences. I went to bed that night and slept more deeply than I had in years. I dreamed of a wide, open field, and I was the only person in it, and it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. The first tremor hit the next morning. A text from my father, uncharacteristically early. Cora, the landlord called. Said the January rent authorization was canceled. Is there a problem with your bank? I was sitting at my kitchen counter, watching a ferry glide across the gray waters of the Sound. I took a slow sip of coffee. The old me would have felt a jolt of panic, a rush of guilt. She would have called immediately, reassuring him, promising to fix it. But I was no longer her. I replied simply, "No problem with the bank, Dad. I've canceled all future payments. You and Mom will need to manage the accounts from now on." The three dots appeared and disappeared for a full minute. Then, a call. I let it go to voicemail. The message he left was clipped, annoyed. "I don't have time for games, Cora. The rent is due. Call me." An hour later, my mother called. Her voice on the voicemail was a masterclass in gentle manipulation, a tone she had perfected over a lifetime. "Cora, darling, your father's in a state. There's obviously been a misunderstanding about the dinner. Liam and I were just talking about it. Sophie is just a very anxious girl, you know? It had nothing to do with you, personally. Please call me back, sweetheart. Let's sort this out. It had nothing to do with you, personally." The four most dishonest words in the English language. An exclusion is always personal. They were trying to frame my reaction as a childish tantrum over a single meal, ignoring the lifetime of context that gave it such weight. They saw the tip of the iceberg, but I was the one who knew the crushing, silent mass of it that lay beneath the water. My brother, Liam, chimed in that afternoon. His text was laced with the baffled innocence of the golden child who had never faced a real consequence. "Are you seriously doing this over a dinner invite? Sophie feels terrible. She had no idea you'd react like this." I stared at his words, the blame so subtly, expertly shifted to me. My reaction was the problem, not their action. I was the one being difficult. Too sensitive. For the first time, I replied with a sliver of the truth. "No, Liam. I'm not doing this over a dinner. I'm doing this because for my entire life, I've been asked to be convenient. And I'm finally realizing that my worth is not measured by how little space I take up." I turned my phone on silent and put it in a drawer. The silence in my apartment was no longer just an absence of noise. It was a presence. It felt clean, solid, like the freshly turned earth of a garden bed waiting for new seeds. I spent the afternoon at my drafting table, the charcoal smooth and sure under my fingers. I was designing for myself now. A small terrace garden, a place of my own. By the end of the week, the voicemails had grown from worried to frantic. Cora, the insurance company sent a cancellation notice. We can't operate without it. That was my father. Sweetheart, people are talking. Mrs. Gable from the bakery asked why you weren't at the shop this week. What are we supposed to tell her? This is making us look bad. That was my mother. They weren't saying, we miss you. They were saying, your absence is creating logistical problems. The breaking point came 10 days before the solstice. An email from the regional book distributor, which I was still copied on from the initial setup. Subject, urgent. Account hold, Willow Creek Books and Cafe. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Vance, this email is to inform you that your account is now on a shipping hold due to a past due invoice and the removal of the financial guarantor on file. We cannot ship your holiday bestseller order until the outstanding balance of $7,800 is settled and new payment terms are established. This was the big one. The lifeblood of a bookstore during the holidays. Without those books, their shelves would be bare. Their season would be a catastrophe. That evening, I heard a knock on my door. Not a gentle tap, but a series of sharp, insistent raps that echoed the panic I'd been hearing in their voices. I looked through the peephole. It was Liam. He looked pale and stressed, his usual easy charm completely gone. He was alone. I felt a pang of something, not guilt, but a deep, sorrowful pity. He was my brother. I had loved him fiercely, had spent my childhood trailing in his sunnier, more confident wake. But he was also a man who had let his new girlfriend dictate the terms of his family. I opened the door, but I didn't step back to let him in. I stood in the doorway, a human threshold. Cora, my God. I've been calling you for days, he said, his voice strained. I know, I said softly. He ran a hand through his hair. Look, I am so sorry about the dinner. It was stupid. Sophie's young. She gets insecure. She felt like you didn't like her. She put me in an awkward spot. I handled it badly. I'm sorry. Okay, but you can't do this. You're destroying the shop. Mom and Dad are losing their minds. There it was again. The apology, immediately followed by the demand. A transaction. I'll say sorry if you'll turn the money back on. I'm not destroying the shop, Liam, I said, my voice even. I just stopped holding it up. There's a difference. What does that even mean? He asked, exasperated. It was a gift. You gave them the money. I gave them the money to build a dream, I corrected him gently. I didn't sign up to be its silent, full-time, unpaid financial manager. The dinner, it wasn't just a dinner, Liam. It was a message. It told me exactly what I am to all of you. An ATM. A problem solver. A resource. But not family. Not really. Not when it's inconvenient. His face fell. For a second, I saw a flicker of genuine shame in his eyes. It wasn't like that, Cora. Wasn't it? I asked, and the quiet question hung in the air between us. Then why is this the first time in months you've come to my door? Why are you only here now that the money has stopped? He had no answer. He just stood there, on the wrong side of the door, finally understanding that some things, once broken, couldn't be fixed with a quick apology. Please, he whispered. Just help us get through Christmas. We'll work it out after. I looked at my brother, at the man who had let me be cast aside for the sake of convenience, now asking me to be convenient one last time. And I felt the last thread of obligation snap. I can't, Liam, I said, and the words were sad, but they were also free. You all need to learn how to hold up your own dream. Or you need to learn to let it go. I closed the door, not with a slam, but with a quiet, definite click. I leaned against it, and for the first time, I cried. Not for them, but for the girl who had tried so hard, for so long, to earn a love that should have been freely given. The weeks that followed were a study in silence. The frantic calls stopped. The text ceased. They were scrambling, I knew, trying to patch the holes in a ship that was taking on water far faster than they could bail. I saw on the town's social media page that Willow Creek Books had temporarily reduced hours due to unforeseen circumstances. A week later, a local blogger posted a photo of the shop, closed on a Saturday, a hastily written sign taped to the door, closed for inventory. I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound, aching sadness. I had wanted their dream to succeed. I had poured my own hopes into it, but I had learned a brutal lesson. You cannot nurture a garden that is planted in ungrateful soil. My own life, in contrast, began to bloom. The silence they left behind was filled with new things. I took a pottery class. I started hiking the trails on Mount Rainier on weekends. I reconnected with old friends who knew me as Cora, not as Liam's sister or Robert and Eleanor's quiet daughter. I was building a life where I was the main character, not a supporting role in someone else's story. One person I never cut off was my niece, Mia. Liam and his ex-wife had shared custody, and Mia was a bright, gentle soul, a 7-year-old artist who saw the world in vibrant colors. I arranged with her mother to pick her up for our standing Auntie Cora Day once a month. Liam didn't object. He was too consumed by the collapse of the bookstore. On a crisp, sunny Saturday in February, Mia and I were walking through the Old Town district after a trip to the art supply store. Her small hand was warm in mine. As we passed the corner where Willow Creek Books stood, she stopped. The windows were dark and papered over from the inside. A large, official-looking notice was taped to the glass. An eviction notice. "Is Grandma's store sleeping?" Mia asked, her head tilted. I knelt down to her level. How do you explain a failure born of emotional bankruptcy to a child? "Something like that, sweetie," I said. Sometimes, things that look beautiful on the outside aren't strong enough on the inside, and they have to rest for a while. She looked from the dark windows to my face, her expression serious. "Is it because they made you sad?" The directness of a child can be a laser beam to the heart. I felt a lump form in my throat. "Yes," I whispered, the admission costing me more than I expected. "They did make me sad. And I decided I needed to take care of my own heart for a while." She nodded, as if this were the most logical explanation in the world. She reached into her little bag and pulled out a small, smooth, gray stone she had picked up from the beach earlier. She walked to the door of the shuttered bookstore and placed it carefully on the doorstep. "What's that for?" I asked. "It's a wishing stone," she said, her voice full of certainty. "I'm wishing they learn how to be kind." Tears pricked my eyes. I hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of her crayon and shampoo hair. Here was the one pure, unconditional love in that entire family, and I would guard it with my life. We walked away, leaving the small stone as the sole monument to a dream that had died not from a lack of money, but from a lack of grace. Spring arrived in Harborview with a riot of cherry blossoms and daffodils. The light began to return, lingering longer each day. I felt it inside myself, too. A slow, steady brightening. I had sold the plans for the corporate campus garden, and the fee was substantial. I put it all into a new account, one with a single name on it. Mine. I started looking at listings for small apartments with balconies, the dream I had deferred for them. One afternoon, a thick, cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox. It had no return address, but I recognized my mother's elegant, looping handwriting. My heart gave a familiar, nervous flutter, a muscle memory of anxiety. I almost threw it away. But curiosity, or perhaps the need for a final, formal closure, made me take it inside. I sat on my sofa, the sun warm on my face, and opened it. It was a long, rambling, 3-page letter. It was full of words like regret and misunderstanding. It spoke of my father's health, the stress that was giving him chest pains. It mentioned Liam's depression after Sophie had left him, a departure that apparently coincided with the financial collapse. It was a symphony of sorrow, but every note was about their pain, not mine. There was no, "We are sorry for hurting you." There was only, Look at how much we are hurting now. The apology I had once craved was not there. There was no accountability, only a detailed accounting of their misery, presented as evidence for my clemency. The final paragraph was what solidified everything. We know we've made mistakes, Cora. But a family is a family. We have lost everything. The shop, the savings, Dad's pension that we used to try and save it. We are asking you, as our daughter, to find it in your heart to help us, to forgive us. We are your family, and we love you. I read that last line again. We love you. The words felt thin, translucent. Love, to them, was a key they expected would still unlock my resources. I folded the letter neatly. I did not burn it. I did not tear it. I walked to my desk and slipped it into the Willow Creek folder on my computer, a digital file now, a final piece of documentation. It was the last invoice for a debt I had finally paid in full. That evening, I put in an offer on a small condo overlooking the water. It had a wide balcony, perfect for a garden. The day I signed the closing papers, I felt a sense of peace so profound it was almost dizzying. I walked out of the real estate office into the bright May afternoon and took a deep breath of the salt-tinged air. I didn't have the family I had once yearned for, the one from storybooks, gathered around a perpetually welcoming table. But as I stood there, with the keys to my own home in my hand, I realized I had something more valuable. I had a foundation, one that I had laid myself, stone by sturdy stone. It wasn't built on the shifting sands of their approval or propped up by the scaffolding of my sacrifice. It was built on the solid ground of self-respect. A few months later, Mia and I were on my new balcony, surrounded by pots of lavender, rosemary, and fledgling tomato plants. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. We were eating ice cream out of the carton with 2 spoons. Your garden is pretty, Auntie Cora, she said, a smudge of chocolate on her nose. Thank you, sweetie, I said, smiling. I built it for us. Her mother had told me, cautiously, that my parents and Liam had moved into a small rental apartment an hour away. My father had taken a part-time job as a security guard. My mother was working as a cashier. They were surviving. They were not my responsibility. We existed in the same world, but in different orbits. There was no anger left, just a quiet, clean space. Perhaps one day, years from now, a different kind of conversation might be possible. One that began not with a demand, but with a true and humble accounting. A gentle reconciliation, perhaps, over a cup of coffee in a neutral place. But I knew, with a certainty that had settled deep in my bones, that I would never again stand on the wrong side of my own door, begging to be let in. The search for a sanctuary was over. I had finally learned how to build my own, and as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the water shimmering in the twilight, I knew I was home.